Hello. So, if you've been in the drone industry for a while, you might have come across the applications in roof inspections. But what are some of the issues that plague the roofs that we're looking to inspect with a drone? And specifically, how do you actually capture, process, and deliver high quality data when it comes to roof inspections? So, in this particular video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a very particular application, and that's got to do with looking for ponding, water ponding on top of roofs. We're going to be inspecting a shopping mall, and this particular shopping mall has a flat roof, which is unfortunately plagued with lots and lots of ponds of water that get accumulated. And when this type of water gets accumulated on the roof, it can typically mean some form of a structural issue, or it can lead to a lot of water ingress. And that's really not a good sign because it can cause all sorts of issues that can only be detected much further down the line. So, with drones, you can actually inspect these buildings much more in advance and help end customers take predictive maintenance steps towards their roof. Let's have a look at the workflow. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be actually using Hammer Missions and the DJI Mavic 2 Pro for this particular task. So let me just create an account. In fact, I've already got one here. So I'm just going to start with the roof inspection. So the process typically starts with the mission planning. You would essentially go in and capture your data with the mission plan. You would then analyze the data, and finally you would report on the data and also maintain all your flight logs. So in this particular mission, we're going to be actually inspecting this particular mall here. It's actually a shopping center, and it's essentially plagued with a lot of water ponding issues. So even with Google Maps, you can sort of see these water ponds that get accumulated on the roof. So we want to be able to fly our drone, create a map and model of this particular site, and then look at all of the different water ponds that get created on top of the flat roof. So where do we begin? We start with the mission planning. So you're going to go in and you're going to create a new folder. So I'm going to call this, let's say, shopping center. So shopping center is our mission. I'm going to turn on layering. I'm going to press OK. And I will have a new folder ready for me to start creating my missions. So I'm going to split this particular mission into two different files. I'm going to say the roof of the shopping center. So let's call it shopping center roof. And I'm going to create another file, which is the shopping center facade. Because one of the things we also want to do is we want to capture the facades of the building, because the facades essentially allow you to create a high quality 3D model of the building and also inspect the facades. Because if the building's got some form of water pooling, water ponding issues, we want to be able to actually see the entire building and not just the roof. So I'm going to go into my mission file, and that's going to bring up the map. What I need to then do is I need to essentially get the coordinates from Google Maps. So I've got the coordinates over here. I can just pinch them from Google Maps. Or if I've got the name of the building, I can use that too. Basically, I bring those coordinates or the name of the building into Hammer Missions. So I'm going to bring in those coordinates and press enter. And there we go. We've got the actual roof on our screen. And so we want to be able to capture this particular roof, and we will be creating two different flight plans for this. So to start with, we're going to do the roof flight plan. So I'm going to actually go into the missions menu. And so because our goal here is to actually create a 3D model, and we want to be able to look at all of the images in that 3D model, I'm going to pick the 3D modeling option for the roof. So I pick the 3D modeling option. And then all I need to do is trace out the boundary for that roof. So I'm going to use healthy margins here because the building actually has, as you can see, a bit of a balcony on this particular bit. So I want to make sure that even though the roof is L-shaped, the building has, I want to cover more of the building. So I'm actually going to go across the balcony to this point over here. And then I'll mark my fourth point over there. So that covers the roof. And then I'm going to hit enter. And that's going to create a default flight plan for me. Once I've got the default flight plan, I'm going to basically press the settings gear, and we're going to start configuring my mission. So firstly, we're going to configure the camera. So that's for this particular mission is going to be a Mavic 2 Pro. I'm going to look at the altitude. So the altitude, based on what I've looked at, based on what I know from Google Earth, this building's probably at about 40 meters or 120 feet. And so what I want to do is I want to actually fly at 20 meters above the roof. And so that would be 60 meters or roughly 180 feet. So I can essentially choose that as my altitude for this mission. But what you'll notice is there's the ground offset, and the ground offset is basically the height of the building that needs to be actually added for your mission plan. And that's really important because without the ground offset, your overlap calculations are going to be incorrect. And we've got a whole video on ground offset itself, so if you wanted to go check that out, feel free to do so. But the ground offset is going to be 120 feet because we're going to be looking at the height of the building, which is about 40 meters or 120 feet, roughly speaking. And so we've got our mission altitude at 180, ground offset at 120, and we've got our overlaps at 80% each. Now, since we'll also be taking the facade images, we don't need 80% overlap, so we can actually reduce that to 70% on front and side. And the overlap, if you're not aware, is basically how much the images overlap with each other. And so you can play around with the overlap to also get a good number of images from your flights and to reduce the flight time. So at the moment, it's sort of saying that it's going to take about 3 batteries with the Mavic 2 Pro and about 500 images. So with the 80% overlap, that was a lot higher. So I decided to actually reduce the amounts of overlap because I really don't need 1,000 images of just the roof. The 70% overlap will do just fine. So we go for 70% overlap. The flight direction is actually in the direction of the polygon already. And since it's the square we're flying, we don't really have to optimize that. Gimbal tilt is basically the tilt of the camera. So we want to keep that negative 90 degrees, which means the camera is going to be pointing straight down, looking straight into the roof. Flight speed at the moment, automatically calculated by Hammer, is 1 meter per second. So I can increase that if I want to, but I'm going to miss images. So instead of playing around with the flight speed, I'm going to go with the optimal flight speed that's already calculated for me. Reverse the flight path or not. We can see that the flight starts at this corner of the polygon. And since the mission is going to be flown by Dan, who you will later see in the video, he's most likely going to be flying from the parking area. So maybe he wants to actually fly from a different place. So we can reverse the flight path and the flight can actually start closer to the parking. And that just allows you to start your flight from one place to the other. I want to add smooth corners because I want to make sure the flight is actually smooth. So you can see all of the corners have been smoothed out. So the drone actually flies a bit like a fixed wing as opposed to a multicopter, even though it's not really a fixed wing. And I just want to see cross-check all of my images. So I can bring up all of the images and I can see I've got a very nice, very evenly distributed double grid with the 2 different axes of the grid covered over here in this particular mission. I can do a quick simulation so we can see what the drone will do in flight. So it will start in this corner of the polygon, and then it would carry on with the single grid pattern first, and then the other grid pattern right after the first grid. And it's going to essentially just go around that. And I can see this not just in 2D, but I can also see this in 3D, just to be able to get an idea for what does the actual flight plan on top of the shopping center actually look like. So we can sort of see that. At this point, I can send this data to my client or a stakeholder or a team member, just so that they get an idea for what the actual flight plan looks like. Right, okay, so that covers the roof side of things. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to do the facade. So we go back to our flight planning and we pick the facade. So with the facade, we've got once again the same building in front of us. And because we had chosen the mission layers option earlier in the video, you can sort of see that actually I can still see the layer of this mission. And it's all grayed out, so it doesn't interfere with the actual planning that I want to do, but it's still there for me to get a healthy reference as to what the top layer of the building looks like. So at this point, what I can do is I can actually go into the missions menu again, and I can now choose facade mapping. Now, once I've chosen facade mapping, I can actually click on the corners of the building. So this is where I will actually mark the corners of the building. So essentially pinching exactly the corners. I don't need a healthy margin for this particular flight plan. I just need to literally fly the corners of the building. And because I know this balcony is actually at a lower height, I can actually fly over that balcony and still get good data. So just going to go ahead and mark the corners. And then I can finish the flight by finishing the last corner over here. You'll see we'll extend that in a moment to get more coverage. But once I press the OK button, that's going to create a default facade flight plan for me. So you can sort of see that we've got the default facade flight plan. Now, I want to potentially add more images in this corner because they have not been added or by default. So what I can do for that is I can actually extend this particular corner to over here. And that's going to momentarily distort the flight plan, but then I can add a new corner over here. And that's going to essentially fix that corner and cover that fully. And basically, you'll have some extra images on towards the end of the flight, but it would at least cover the entire building, which is what we want. And so now we've got a facade flight plan as well, and we're going to go and configure it. So let's go into the settings. So we're now in the settings, and we want to once again change this to our drone. So this is the Mavic 2 Pro in our case, but if you're using a different drone, you basically use the camera you're flying with. I didn't mention this earlier, but the reason I chose the altitude to be 60 meters or 180 feet on the roof side of things was because the GSD was less than 1 centimeter per pixel. And keeping your GSD under 1 centimeter per pixel can mean you're going to get high quality results. So it doesn't have to be exactly 1 centimeter per pixel. It can be lower than that, but that's just good rule of thumb that you can follow to be able to get good data. So at this point, what you'll do is you'll configure your flight mode. So you've got your it's basically flying with first. And so what you want to do is you want to check your top altitude, your bottom altitude. So essentially the top of the roof should align with this altitude. Since we are at 40 meters for the roof, we can go slightly higher. So let's say 130 feet as opposed to 120 feet. And we want to keep the bottom altitude low enough that we are seeing all of the roof. So we know that the roof is at 40 meters and roughly half the roof, 20 meters or about 60 feet is where we will be able to still see most of the roof because we'll be using a gimbal tilt. So we're going to keep the gimbal tilt at negative 45 degrees, which means that it's going to have an oblique angle when it's capturing the roof. And we're going to try to be roughly 10 meters from the roof, maybe up to 15 meters. And so horizontal distance at the moment is set to 33 feet. So we're going to leave it at that. And what we can do is we can actually increase our overlap to 70%. So this is quite important because, again, you want to have high overlap even on your facade images. So once we do that, now you will notice that some of the images over here get too, let's say, congested. So what you can do is that's because you've got an L shape in this flight plan. So what you can do is you can actually follow the shape of the building over here and move this point slightly out so that you get a nice evenly spaced flight plan capturing the facade of the building. So that's the facade of the building. And so if I do a simulation, just like I did before, I'll be able to see what the facade flight plan looks like. And this is basically capturing the vertical flight plan for the building. And you can see that in 3D, just like the other one, just like the roof. And you can share that with any one of your team members or stakeholders by just pressing the share button and then bringing in any stakeholders that need to see the flight plan. Right, so at this point, we're going to transition to the flight side of things, and I'm going to let Dan take over, who's going to be flying this mission today.
As you can see, the weather today, it's mixed. It's a bit sunny, but also cloudy, but I prefer to take all the photos on cloudy because you have soft shadows. So it's best that we have all the pictures quite as similar as possible during the day. The building has this complex shape here. It's an intermediate balcony or terrace or something like that. I'm curious how it will turn out from the images. All right, so the rain stopped a bit, and now we can set up the drone on a flat surface where there is no iron or steel or any metal. We turn it on. Okay. And now we will do measurements of the building. For example, its exact height. And we will align the dots on the maps with the actual corners of the building. So to shoot the images from lateral, we have clearance from these poles to the facade around 15 meters. My only concern is this tree here, which is kind of close to the building. It's maybe 10 or 15 meters. So I either have to choose to shoot too close to the building, which is less than 10 meters, or to shoot from high up at 40 degrees down, like this, which is a bit higher than the mall itself. We'll see.
Right. Okay. So that was a very interesting mission. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed watching what the field workflow looks like. And now what we've got is basically all of the images from the flight have been uploaded to the data analysis tab on Hammer Missions. And you can already see from the images that have been taken by the drone that there are severe water ponding issues on this particular roof all over the place, really. And so there are many images that require annotation. If I bring up any of these images that you can see on the mini map over here on the roof, there is lots of different issues on this particular roof, and lots of ponding. And you can actually see from some of the outlines before that there was ponding on other parts of the roof as well. So, but before we get into the annotation and looking at all of the defects, what we're going to do is we're going to actually process this data into a 3D model and a 2D map so that we have an overview, a broad overview of what it looks like. So once I've uploaded all the images, I can press this process button over here. So I press process button, and basically it's going to bring up an option for me to be able to choose whether I want a 2D map, a 3D model, or both a 2D map and a 3D model. So since I need both a 2D map and a 3D model, I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to hit process. But to save time in this video, I've already done that process. So if I basically bring up the 3D side of things for this particular building, here's what that looks like. So here's the shopping mall in 3D, so you can sort of see it from all different vantage points. And if I was to bring up all the images that were used to capture it, you can also see all of the images that were used to capture the 3D model. So you've got the roof flight plan that we made before, and then we've also got the facade flight plan that we made, and they were basically combined into one 3D model. And now you can have a 3D representation of the roof, which is much better than Google Earth, much more high definition, and can actually be used for an overall inspection. So, and I didn't just create a 3D model, I also created a 2D map. So if I bring up the 2D map side of things, we have a 2D map as well that has been overlaid on top of Google, so you can sort of see what the 2D map looks like. And once again, you can see both from the 2D map and for the 3D model that there has been severe issues on this roof with respect to water ponding. So what we want to do is we want to actually indicate all of those areas on where the water ponding is and how bad it is. So, what we're going to do in this particular project is we're going to actually not mark every single water pond, but what we're going to do is we're going to mark areas. So we can sort of say this is sort of like the, let's say the hot zone number one, and then you've got another area over here towards the back of the building, and we've got a third area over here. So we're sort of clustering the water pond and then indicating to our customer where the issues are. And so I'm going to basically choose the comment section over here, and then I'm going to drop a point, and I'm going to say, I'm going to call this area 1, and I'll just say severe water ponding issues found. And urgency level, I'm going to keep this one moderate because of the size. And so that's going to create an area over there. And I can also create an area over here because I can see two of the large issues over there. So I can sort of say area 2, that's my title here. And we're going to leave that one empty, but we're going to give it a high severity. We're going to give a similar severity level to this area. So this is going to be area 3. And we're going to give it a high severity as well. Going to leave that over here. And then we're going to have another area over here, which is going to be area 4. And that's going to be medium severity. And we're going to leave that over there. So now, very easily, the end customer can see the issue areas, and they can basically do something about it. So we're not just going to look at the map or the model, which we have already used to create our issue areas. We're also going to look at the images themselves. So to do that, we're going to go back to our 3D mode and we're going to turn on the images. So we're going to turn on the images, and the first thing we'll do is we'll basically look at images from all areas. So we had the 4 areas that we marked up. So we can basically click on simply those areas. And so we can now zoom in and actually look at the details. So if you wanted, we can go and sort of create an annotation. So we can sort of call this a medium pond. And we can sort of give it a tag, and we can sort of say it's in area 1, which was the area that we marked on our 2D map. We can do the same thing, and we can do another one over here, and we can sort of say medium pond, and we can give it a tag, and we can say area 1. And basically we can leave that there. Now that image is going to store those particular ponding issues, and we can do that if we like for all of the different ponds that have been accumulated. We know that there was a very severe pond on this side of the roof, so we're going to actually go in and mark up that area as well. So we're going to click on that image, and that's going to bring up that corresponding area on the right hand side here. And since this looks to be a much more severe area, we're going to sort of call this a large water pond, and we're going to sort of say area 2, and we're going to give it a severe rating. And so that's going to be stored as well in that particular image. And then we're going to go to our third area. We can already see that some of this is basically probably coming from the cooling systems that are utilized on the roof. There might be leakages there, and then they are essentially causing these ponds to form, which can later on cause all sorts of issues, water ingress and whatnot. So water ponding once again, and we can, sorry, wrong arrow keys there. I'm going to go back to the image that I was looking at. Yeah, so different vantage point here, but basically the same thing, but let's say water ponding. So, and I'm going to give this area 3, and then I'm going to mark this as severe as well. And then finally, I will be looking at this particular area. And so I'm going to also bring up this particular water pond over here. And I'm just going to say medium water pond, and I'm going to call this area 4. And I'm going to leave it as a medium severity. Now, once I've done that, and I might sort of go ahead and actually mark all of the different areas, I can essentially just look at the annotated images. So maybe I don't want the end customer or anyone looking at this building to actually look at all of the images. So I can basically just click on the annotated images. And what that's going to do is going to filter out all the other images. And now I've got a way to actually visually see the 4 main areas in 3D as well. And I can cycle through all these images. So if I was an end customer looking at this data, you can present the data in this way where they can actually see, oh, okay, well, you've got an issue here, an issue here, an issue there. And you've got all of these 4 different areas that have been designated. And you've also added severity levels to those areas. And so they can very easily see the issues. And since they're marked up and since they're kept in the cloud, they're essentially accessible by anyone. So at this point, you can actually look at other issues in this building. So one of the things that we did do is that we did capture the facades. So if there's a requirement to look at the water issues, which might be trickling down to the facades, you can actually bring up all of the images again. And actually you can click on any one of these images, and then you can start going through the facade. So you can already see that if I click on the facade, there are other water issues forming on the facade. So I can essentially click on that and I can mark that up. So I can just go and sort of say water issue. And that will be saved as an annotation on that particular image. So that gets saved over there. And then I can just cycle through, and I will be able to look at all of the facade in that way. And if I wanted to mark up more issues, I can essentially do that. And the facade is also quite important for this building. And it's almost as if we're sort of flying as the drone would fly around the building to mark up any issues. And so over here, again, on the balcony, we sort of see um, water issue. And so we can basically mark up all of these different pondings that we see on the building. And because we've got both the 3D and the 2D, we're able to actually determine where the issue areas are, and we can see it both from the roof point of view and also the facade point of view. And essentially, we can go in and mark up all of the different images, and then finally create a report. So I'm gonna once again filter, and now I can see not just the 2D images that are aligned with the roof, but I can also see the facade images that are aligned with the facade. And then they bring up all of these other images that are important and that we need to be able to we need to be mindful of as well. At this point, I can essentially go ahead and mark up all the different issues that I want to. I've got them in 3D, I've got them in 2D, and I think we are ready to not just look at this from a 3D and 2D point of view, but also to create a report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the report button, and I'm going to export all of the annotated images, and I'm going to add an introductory paragraph. So I can just sort of say this building was inspected using a drone. All water ponding issues and their locations were identified and reported. And I can also choose to add the image tags, which is the areas, if you recall from earlier in the video. And I can choose to add a cover image if I want to. And I can also add guest links. So once I've done that, I'm going to hit the generate report button, and we're going to let this generate over the next couple of minutes. And once it's generated, we'll be able to see the end result for the end customer. So I'm going to let that
Right.
run. Okay. So our report is now done. And so we sort of get this nice little button over here to download our report. So once I click on that, I should be able to download the report. And I can bring up the report basically right in the web browser if I wanted to. But basically, we've got an introductory paragraph, which is basically what we wrote, but we could probably write a lot more than that. And we'll sort of be able to sort of see a summary of all the issues. Let me make that a bit bigger. So basically, we'll be able to see all of the different issues that were found in this particular inspection. And so you will be able to see, firstly, the location of the actual building, the date the inspection was carried out, the total number of images that were annotated. So we have the total annotated images and the total issues, mild issues and severe issues that were found. We'll have a little description of the issues, describing what the different color codes mean, and then we'll start going into the actual issues. So, for example, the facade issue that we actually mentioned, the water issue, and then we'll basically be going into other things like the balcony water issue. And we'll also be going through things like the severity of the water pooling in the zone 3 and then the area 4, area 5. And so we'll essentially just go through all of the different images, and this is all automatically generated for us so that we can easily take this to our stakeholders, our team members, our customers, and then show them what the issues are. And if they do want to investigate a particular image a bit more, so let's say they want to see this particular image in higher quality, they click on the Open in Hammer Hub button, and then what that should do is that should take them straight from the actual image to the project, and not just to the project, but actually to that particular image in the project, so that they're able to see where that image is. So if they click on that, they'll be able to see the image. And then if they bring up the cameras and click on annotated images, they'll be able to actually see the particular issue, and then also compare that with the roof and figure out where that issue is, which is in this particular area in this example, and look at the image and then know what to do further with it. So that's that. So, and we can not only share a report with our customer or stakeholder, we can actually share a link as well. So if you wanted to share this with your team members, you can basically just turn on the link option, and then you can click on the link button. Since this project is currently created by Dan and not myself, I can't actually see the link over here, but generally you can click on this link, and then you can essentially send it to other stakeholders and have them review the data without having to sign in, just review the data. So hopefully this video gave you an overview on how you can use tools like the DJI Mavic and Hammer Missions to create a 3D inspection of the roof and facade, and essentially annotate issues like water ponding, water ingress. And in fact, when it comes to water issues and moisture issues, one of the things that's really useful is to actually look at the roof not just using a visual RGB camera, but also from a thermal camera. So if you're interested in that workflow, I'm going to link you to a thermal video right after this video where you can watch some of the thermal and visual workflows for a roof inspection. Hopefully this was interesting. If it was, do give us a like. And if you'd like to watch some of these videos, give us a subscribe. We'll see you in the next video for Knowledge Hub.